Welcome everyone to another fun stream here in our Let's Talk series. I wanted to talk already for quite some weeks about this Apple lawsuit there with Apple versus Epic, and there are a lot of revelations in there, really interesting quotes and emails from all sides. Today I want to focus on one particular thing, that is Craig Federer testifies during that lawsuit that the Mac currently has a level of malware that Apple does not find acceptable. And that is of course a little bit funny for a company that previously made so much fun of Windows and was always like privacy and stability, security and malware and stuff, and no antivirus and stuff. And how did we get there, right? So Apple argues that to make the App Store review process more look more lawful and more for the user. And so they argue, this is of course ridiculous, right? They argue on one side their former flagship and secure macOS it's actually not secure because side loading and stuff. So they portray this non-App Store world as unacceptable level of malware, and iOS, basically they throw macOS under the bus to save their holy and much more money producing App Store iOS cow there. And this is of course complete bogus. I said this a couple of times. So let's quickly discuss the current state here in our microkernel and general computing design series, because I actually thinking, with all criticism of Apple and previous videos, gatekeeper, notarization, total bullshit, security theater, what can we actually do better? And the whole argument here is of course, wait a second, why do I have this here twice? This is not what I wanted here though. Probably clicked that wrong. And this is of course complete bogus, this claim. You just Google here, because obviously, and even of course this is in the news, but this is the same news. But here even Xcode ghost malware details revealed in Fortnite trial. Also previously, right, previously in this trial, security vulnerability, do we inform the users? Of course not. But also here Google Play App Store, a large malware distribution, and the list goes on and on. Probably how many hits do we have here? Probably millions of, only 172,000. But just here to illustrate the App Store, this review process doesn't work. I said this before, it was in the news before. And why does it not work? Because Apple doesn't, people always think they do code level review. Of course not, the developers like us and other people out there, Fortnite and so on, they do not give them the source code. And even if they would, imagine AAA games, or previously there was Autodesk's AutoCAD for like a brief moment of one summer in the App Store, because before probably Autodesk realized this distribution model doesn't work for them, too much 30% goes to Apple and stuff. And imagine Apple would do code level review on Autodesk's AutoCAD, even if it was only LT or our OCR or Exact Scan or AAA games. That of course doesn't scale. They don't have the resources. It totally doesn't make any sense. So they basically just binary scan that a little bit. I heard also some automation there at work. And then they mostly actually a little bit, does it crash? Reviewer opens the app, does it crash? We had this with our Exact Scan sometimes. They did their strange stuff. It's like tried combinations we didn't really have in our office. They sent us a couple of retries. Also once Xcode like miscompiled the stuff behind our back. It worked in our testing, but because Xcode always does another build and sends, so actually the bloody Xcode, amazing engineering. Anyway, a couple of times Apple rightfully found, the app does crash, fix that please, thank you very much. But otherwise, They of course do not find if the app plays nice in the review process. It can be as simple as a timer or as simple as other user interactions to behave nicely in the review process, and more malicious out there. So we probably can all agree that the whole review process is nonsense. And how did we even get there, right? We got here because software is just so insecure, written in C, obviously difficult, no memory protection except the operating system. And some people tried to mitigate this also with Cubes, for example, reasonable, secure, endorsed by Edward Snowden. So what does Cube do? Cube does virtualize all the different use case scenarios like browsing and email in different virtual machines so that they are truly separated. That is, of course, a much more secure security module than trusting and hoping for Apple's review. And that is, of course, a problem, right? The review is certainly never perfect. Even if at Apple it's not good, I would say at Apple the review is like top of the bottom. Basically, they mostly, except does it crash, but otherwise, does it violate rules that Apple would lose revenue, different payment methods and stuff. That is what their review is good for. And if we established the review helps next to nothing, the real solution can only be more secure systems, right? And that is, of course, a problem with a legacy in macOS, but even more so in Windows and probably even Linux, just think Xorg, but even then all the C libraries. So the longer I think about this, and I'm thinking about this a couple of years already, I would argue we only solve this. Putting everything in sandbox, of course, doesn't scale either. It's a little bit of a security, it's a little bit of a usability annoyance to have all this disconnect of not easily copy and pasting and all the not easily drag and drop limitations that, of course, Edward Snowden can get away with, but not every user. So writing much more secure software is, of course, definitely necessary, because that is the thing on the macOS side, right? Constantly on macOS they find bugs in the bootloader, which is good for jailbreaking, obviously, but not the best for security. They find bugs in sandboxing. This is also the next thing, right? Sandboxing. Maybe a thing that Java was one of the earlier things to establish. Correct me or leave comments below if you I think once upon a time I googled this. Probably there was other research before Java. But the problem also with sandboxing is on iOS, of course, most stuff is, some Apple stuff, not a lot of stuff, all normal apps are sandboxed. On macOS, mostly, but not completely. But even then, right, coming back to point one, writing more secure software, because even on macOS or iOS, on both, there have been sandbox escapes, right? Not only from the browser side, Apple's precious WebView, Safari stuff, but even escaping, accessing the camera and stuff. And that is also a problem on the Linux side, right? I mean, about Windows, we don't even need to talk about this DOS-based level, DOS API-based kind of 16-bit legacy stuff there that is still in there in Windows 32 APIs and all the legacy stuff. But even on Linux, right, we have some sandboxing, certainly in this Firefox, but we don't, or Poplar's PDF viewer, I think in some cases, and certainly others, but not everything is sandboxed, right? And there you see, coming back to this argument and the point of this video, the macOS has what Apple wants to do is they want to take the argument away from the technical reason, which I always said the App Store has so many problems. Previous video, starting from the review process as outlined does not help much, plus the vast disconnect of developers and users. They try to portray the App Store as the holy grail, when in reality it's just the 30%, or no, 15 to 30% bringing a cash cow, and away from the technical details. And security in IT does not work without all the nitty-gritty technical details down to the operating system level. And even on Linux, and then ReduxOS and stuff, if we want to talk about much more secure stuff, just writing stuff in Rust. So the next thing is writing more secure software, right? Certainly Apple, Objective-C, or Swift a little bit better, obviously. But the latest and greatest, Rust, does it help? Does it solve all the issues? And I have to bring you the sad news. No, it doesn't. Because even if you write top secure and bug-free software in Rust, the user will sideload stuff, right? They will sideload their Adobe Acrobat, they will sideload their Microsoft Office or other or AAA games, right? And they might not be written in Rust. What does it help you if you have a secure operating system? And that's also the point of sandboxes, right? For example, on Windows, most of the stuff is not similar to in Linux, not run in a sandbox. And I come to the conclusion, probably like most security researchers, we need to combine all of them, and App Store is not one of them. The App Store, similar to code signing, certificates and notarization, doesn't improve security, right? Apple blank signs their Apple app notarization like our software. They don't do that much review, they only automatically check if the binary meets some certain criteria. And that is complete security theater and bullshit. And real technical solutions, we even need to improve on Linux or future, like ReduxOS, future operating systems, ReduxOS, Fuchsia or Futura, or whatever they want to pronounce it. I probably need to practice pronouncing Fuchsia. And certainly the user always wants to sideload their software. And if it's not sandboxed, you have a super secure operating system written in Rust or whatever, and the AAA game can just access the webcam, the AAA game can just access your precious Office documents. And obviously most users will not create a gaming user or run gaming in a virtual machine or their Office stuff in a virtual machine, like on Cubes. Probably I need to check out Cubes more. I think the last time I more in-depthly reviewed that, as far as I remember, it's probably Xen based, in case you're wondering. Not the greatest fan of Xen to start with. And I also, because Cubes certainly with Xen and all the full virtual machines comes with quite some resource usage and usability, not easily drag and drop and copy and paste and stuff, things. So to summarize, we recurring theme here, of course, need a much more secure kernel than Linux. Let's see if they have a new release. Oh, usually when we load here the release live on this channel, then also, yeah, it's a tiny little ULV. I'm on the road. Microsoft Surface. I need the new ThinkPad, man. If this ever loads today, how many drop frames do we have even? Because we are probably only, hey, 0 drop frames, but we're only rendering 15 frames. Yeah, recurring theme, the last 5.12.8 release. I loaded this already earlier. The usual, yeah, relatively small release. Looks a little bit, yeah, because NFC, fixed memory leak, right? And BPF, right? Recurring theme here, I called this out already a dozen of times. The the monolithic single address space innovation lets just in time in the single address space monolithic kernel the greatest OS innovation since sliced bread. I called it out before. Much too complex, more just-in-time compiled code does not belong into your kernel, let alone a single address space monolithic kernel where you can access everything. And I quoted that so often, the lure people of small minimal virtual machine stuff gave up on verifying bytecode in the Linux kernel. It's like, yeah, fix mask direction, rep aux data. And given that this is a relatively, can we also scroll? Why do we, this is already the end. This release so small, mostly VPF, context tracking. Yeah, this release so small that I guess these fixes are probably, maybe, well, certainly this would not be a small, quick and dirty release thing, recurring theme here, if it would not be important. So I guess, yeah, virtualization, right? Virtualize everything, and then hot fixes, bug fixes, context tracking, guest time, BPF, because JIT. So yeah, recurring theme. We need something more secure than a single address space monolithic Linux kernel. Plus security model. I have to say the stuff needs to be sandboxed, because even if your stuff is super secure, you need to validate random downloads, and because otherwise, even if the download is secure, right, your download might be written in Rust without unsafe code, top-notch memory, address space, safe and proven and validated and whatnot, and yeah, it might very stable and very memory allocation correct send all your webcam data, your files away if it's not sandboxed and the user doesn't get a ding dong. Do you want to have your AAA download access your webcam and your business documents? So, and that is not where we are. This is not where we are today. In the Linux world, we are there somewhat in the macOS world, certainly also not in the Windows world. We are certainly a little bit there in the Android world, I would say, but even there, I would also say, last but not least, everything is too complex, right? In my opinion, from what I've seen in 20 years here, macOS, Linux, certainly Windows, especially Windows, right? All the APIs, multiple security, encryption architectures, even on macOS, previously they had OpenSSL, they removed that in at least user visible in latest Big Sur. They still have it hidden somewhere, so it's somehow automatically virtually sandbox for old binaries, but it's OpenSSL is not in the root file system for normal file access stuff anymore. But they also have multiple, like also some old security framework and new. It's like, yeah, it's a mess, and even messier on Windows, where they also have multiple security and encryption frameworks. But that's not all. The complexity with APIs, way too high to secure. That is also the recurring issue why in macOS, Windows, but even Linux, think JSON parsing and graphic handling, like X11, still every year or so new security vulnerabilities, even in libx11. Yes, it is on the way out, but just wait for Wayland written in C security vulnerabilities waiting to be found there. So to summarize, this lawsuit brings out really interesting quotes from Apple. Probably need to collect a couple of them and can make a dedicated video there. The state of security in Linux, not amazing, unfortunately. Leave me in the comments. Yes, I know, I'm using Linux, I'm running Linux distribution. For those, if that triggers you, let's see how fast this loads today here in this very overloaded Surface ULV Core i7 thing. Yes, I run Linux distribution, but I'm reflecting and I'm thinking, researching how does this stuff really needs to be done. And my summary is as seen on macOS, Windows and Linux. Microkernel, which we do not have, well, not even much on macOS, Windows, Linux certainly not. Multi-server, meaning network stack, and other like USB stick, not in your single address space. Trusted root compute base there, sandboxing for apps, again recurring theme, right? The user might download Zoom or GoToMeeting and they don't want this stuff like SolarWinds and other ransomware. Yeah, ransomware. You accidentally download something, it runs in whatever way in an email because user click on the shit and you 1 million click here and you don't want stuff non-sandbox, encrypt all your files, send all your files away, access your microphone and stuff. And that is even on Linux an afterthought, right? This was not a design goal decision and baked in the Unix kernel. And I would argue this needs to be much more simple and already baked into the roots of the operating system. It needs to be the primary design decision and not an afterthought for that to work much more reliable because again, even from the biggest, richest companies on the world, recurring theme, hashtag peak bugs there. And that is, yeah, last but not least, sure, this unfortunately requires rewriting everything, and that is probably why we don't have this, except Fuchsia, for example, because even Google Chrome OS, they use Linux and Chrome written in C++ and so on. And certainly not Windows, all the C and C++ legacy code base, even macOS, even there where it previously was Objective-C, which also wasn't better than C, but yeah, even macOS has still a lot of C code, the Mach microkernel, the Unix, GNU, Unix services, and a lot of base libraries. And even the new stuff is certainly not Rust, not sure. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, I've not heard from my insiders that they would use Rust. Certainly the Swift is the new Objective-C there on Apple's side. So, and I'm not even saying Rust is the only thing, but it's certainly right now one of the better things. That is why I'm recurringly calling that out. Anyway, designing an OS, certainly not an easy task with such kind of, I would actually call this user security, because the difference is, sure, Unix and Linux can be somewhat secure, except the recurring kernel and other C library and other system C library and other JSON XML parsing library and stuff, or OpenSSL, God forbid. C macro preprocessor, we got this, totally not. And yeah, rewriting everything, a huge undertaking, and certainly why we don't have this and why we have solutions like cubes of just like, yeah, it's somewhat working, let's just, it's not the best usability, but let's virtual machine. And even then, right, we had virtual machine breakouts in Xen, in KVM, so much to, yeah, let's sandbox everything. At the end of the day, it's like, it's still some sandbox, still some virtualizations insecurity. Plus, of course, with the complexity, x86 considered harmful. It's like there can always be some system management mode vulnerability if you are someone like Edward Snowden and need to worry about people manipulating your BIOS and sending out all your precious documents out in system management mode. Anyway, that will be interesting to do and certainly to monitor. Given that track record of macOS and Windows, we will certainly have stuff to discuss here on this channel for decades to come. For me, that means this dream of an own from scratch microkernel. We could also, not invented here, the two best things seen so far are Google's Fuchsia, that we could also simply just fork, although don't like some of the design decisions, but certainly one of the best things out there, and otherwise Redux OS. I would actually say Fuchsia, it's probably higher performance because the last time I probably need to re-evaluate Redux.js, but the last time I've seen they somehow passed data even in storage servers in not the most efficient ways. So for us that means writing something like a multi-server microkernel, which probably like Fuchsia or GNU Herd, hopefully more modern and more performance than GNU Herd. Huge undertaking if we want to take sandboxing and application security into account. And doing that right is certainly non-trivial, which is obviously why so few companies currently do that. Anyway, that is probably it for the summary. Mostly in this Let's Talk, these details, spreading here some awareness, summarizing some sorts and the state of the industry. I hope you found this interesting and learned something. And don't forget to share, like and subscribe. And I hope to see you soon for the next videos and live streams to come. We had a couple of comments, biggest from macOS, developed by Apple. Yeah, Apple logic nowadays is basically, we know what exactly is going good for you, going to enforce it. Welcome Danny, finally found time for you. Welcome everyone. And also Apple gives special permission to its software that will not be allowed to third-party code like JIT. I think you can request JIT. So on macOS there is a JIT entitlement, certainly, and that is also a huge, probably the last comment here for this video, a huge thing on the iOS store, right? The arrogance of Apple blocking JIT, just-in-time code, and with that, among other things, for the most part, third-party browsers that are not using Apple's WebKit, and thus certainly also in this lawsuit comes out with some communications, this huge, how should I call this, problem of, I think developers, I think this from the top of my memory, communications of Safari and WebView being a little bit slow, being updated to the latest and greatest web standards, and the severely limiting, for example, gaming in the browser, which otherwise you could bypass the App Store by having AAA gaming in the browser with state-of-the-art WebGL or WebVulkan and whatnot, and certainly JIT. But because Safari is not state-of-the-art and the most performant in WebGL and stuff, it's like, unfortunately we couldn't do AAA gaming in the browser because, or streaming, right? This Microsoft and other streaming services for iOS. And so much to Apple's review process, and certainly a huge roadblock in anti-competitive behavior of totally ruling out competition with the best browser and giving users a choice, which is also why I'm personally phasing iOS Apple stuff out significantly. Previous videos, where is it here? Samsung Galaxy S10, right? Linux. Anyway, I tried actually live streaming from macOS some time ago. It was a totally truthful, awful experience. So much to, you can build a YouTube channel with your Linux distribution, and you can do all your office work and whatnot with your own Linux distribution, LibreOffice and stuff, and Firefox and whatnot. Certainly much more free choice than in the App Store, and a much more liberating and free experience than the cumbersome iOS experience of did you download an app for that tiny little thing you wanted to do, but no, you can't because Apple didn't approve it. Anyway, that's it for today. And I hope to see you next time.